Hi, welcome back to Garden on the Moors. Today I thought I'd show you some of my favourite woodland wildflowers. So let's go take a look. I started my little woodland wildflower journey here along the River Camel, which you can see behind me, to see the beautiful, delicate nodding flowers of these snowdrops, which naturally grow in damp woodlands and along streams in the wild from France all the way down to Russia. Their scientific name, Galanthus, means milk flower, which they get from their white perianth. That's the collective name for the petals and the sepals of the snowdrop flowers. And is also what gives fans of snowdrops their names, which is galanthophiles. They like to collect all different varieties. People aren't too sure whether or not snowdrops are actually native to the UK or not. They certainly appear native to Brittany, which is like the north of France, and for a flower, Brittany and Britain aren't really two massively separate places. Either way, they're very happy here and they're lifesavers for early rising pollinators and lift my spirits as well in the second half of winter. Absolutely gorgeous flowers. If you want to grow snowdrops in your own garden, the best time to plant them is after they've actually flowered. That's called planting them in the green rather than as a bulb. They just seem to settle in a lot better as well when you do it like that. The cheapest way to grow them is to lift a clump of flowers already in your own garden and split them and divide them and then plant them around and spread them that way. Or if you've got a nice friend who's happy to share some with you, then that's a great way as well. They'll naturalise really happily given the right conditions. They obviously, I say they grow along rivers, so they do like sort of damp, shady areas, not too wet, but damp, sort of riverside kind of damp. And they'll tend to spread out about sort of an inch a year as they're going around, and then they'll just colonise quite freely then, and they look absolutely brilliant, creating a nice carpet. We're well into March now, and I've come to my favourite spot to look for wild daffodils. They're all around us here, which is absolutely brilliant, all along this river. Gorgeous. So to tell that these are the wild daffodils, the native variety, the sort of OG of the daffodil world, there's a few things to tell them apart. So first of all, they're much smaller than most of the cultivated varieties. Their tepal, or I think it's tepal or sepal, which is this sort of, looks like a petal bit, is longer or as long as the trumpet in the middle there. It's also a paler lemon yellow compared to the trumpet, which is a dark yellow. And they love to grow in this sort of habitat near a sort of river edge. The other thing is that they are quite small and delicate, really, compared to some of the cultivated varieties. And a big thing is that they always seem to face down, a bit like the Narcissus from Greek mythology, always looking down into the water to look at its reflection. That's exactly what these are doing as well. That's why they get their name. A little further down the river, we bumped into this dipper. For our American friends, this is a white-throated dipper, and is a songbird which, as you can see, forages for insects underwater, which is just crazy. So it's not taking a bath or anything, or washing his feathers. He's going under the water to look for insects, things like caddisfly larvae, that type of thing. That's their favourite. So they go under, turn over rocks, and that's how they find their food. And they actually nest on this river. I found their nests in the past a little further downstream, but you can just see how clear that water is, and all the wildlife is supportive. Fantastic. We're now in the middle of April. We've had some lovely April showers and the temperatures are warming up. As you can see behind me, the leaves on the trees are all coming out everywhere, which is just beautiful. I've come to a very special spot in the east of England to look for a really rare wildflower. Let's go see if we can find some. You may be more familiar with the grassland relative of this really rare wildflower, which is the cowslip. This here is an oxlip. We can tell that because it's a much paler, soft clouded yellow with little dark yellow centres, and all of the flowers hang on one side of the main stem, whereas on cowslips they can go all around. But they're much daintier than cowslips. There's also another similar relative, which is a commonly occurring and naturally occurring hybrid between primroses and cowslips. So they cross and they form a false oxlip, which has really big flowers. So big primrose flowers on a tall stem, they're the false oxlips. These are true oxlips, which are, like I say, much daintier, and they're restricted to a really tiny area of Eastern England, which is where we are now. They're a very special wildflower, and this woods is protected by a deer-proof fence to stop deer from grazing, especially because around here there's quite a lot of the introduced Reeves muntjac and Chinese water deer, which will just come through and nibble all this stuff bare. So they're really well protected here. So those are a flower of ancient woodland, and another one, but thankfully much more common, is this one next to it, which is wood anemone, which is a beautiful little white flower and with deeply lobed leaves just to the side of it here. So wood anemones are quite interesting in that they only open their flowers when it's sunny. Thankfully, the rain's eased off at the minute and we have got a bit of sunshine, so they've opened up, or they're just opening up now. And just like the daffodils with Narcissus, anemones are also named after mythology, this time a Greek god Anamos. There's a lot of really hard names there, but yeah, Anamos, who was a Greek god who would sort of cast flowers before he went anywhere. Oxlips actually replace primroses in this area. They're the sort of primula that lives here. They love this woodland sort of habitat, and they especially like where it's been coppiced, which is what you can see behind me. This is old coppice behind me here. So these are hazel trees that have been cut down, and they send up lots of straight new growth. But it does mean that it lets in lots of light, and then the oxlips absolutely love it. They go crazy and they flower, and they grow really well. Then they don't like it too dense. So they're just like primroses in that sense. But like I say, oxlips actually replace the primroses here. So here's that deer-proof fence that I mentioned earlier. This is to try and keep the deer out of this woods as best as possible. The reason is that deer are at their highest density than they've ever been, because there are no natural predators, there's no hunters, and there's nothing to stop them. Really, they just breed in until they die of disease or are hit by the odd car. So it's really important to protect habitats like this by using these huge fences. So these are the cowslips, which are very similar to oxlips, but as you can see, the flowers are going all around the stem. They're a much bolder yellow, and they have they sort of point out of the, I can't remember what this is called, but they point out of this bit here as well. But the main features are that the flowers go all the way around the stem, and they have really bold yellow rather than a pale yellow flower. So cowslips, just like oxlips, get their name from, they like the high nutrient content of cows. Let's put it that way. They like to grow near poop, basically. So that's what the slip is, it's the cow poop. Just as we were leaving the woodland, we noticed this tiny little bird going up this branch. This is a tree creeper. There's actually a whole family of them in this little patch of woodland here. Brilliant to see. Whilst we're in the area, we've come to this amazing habitat here, which is a floodplain meadow. So in winter, this huge meadow you can see behind me will flood, just like what we have here. And it's a really ideal habitat for a very special wildflower, which we're looking for now. This is actually the largest floodplain meadow in England. So and we're looking for a tiny wildflower, like it's like this sort of size flower head. So it's a bit of a needle in a haystack job, but it's just amazing. There's loads of skylarks singing. You can see how diverse the flora is on the ground. There's all sorts of buttercups and knapweeds and things like that that we can see, which will flower later on in the season. But right now we're searching for a spring flower, and hopefully we'll be able to show you some. It's taken a bit of searching, but we found it. This is a snake's head fritillary. It's an absolute beautiful fritillary that you can get in your garden, but this is a wild one. This is where it belongs, in these flooded meadows, water meadows really. The leaves are grass-like up the stem, and the flower is a dark purple, almost burnt purple burgundy colour checkerboard with the beautiful yellow stamens in the centre of the flower. They're absolutely gorgeous, and they're dotting the landscape like little purple balloons over the grass. Absolutely beautiful. So like I said, this is the first time I've seen these in the wild. It's absolutely wonderful to see them in a natural environment like this. The other thing we found are a few corn buntings, which I really wasn't expecting in here. I've only ever seen them actually in cornfields or, wheat fields, that sort of thing. But they're actually out in this open grassland, which is it's fantastic. And the flora around us is full of all sorts of different things. You can see the leaves of buttercups and meadowsweet, knapweed, different thistles, and things that I don't even know what they are. So it's really interesting. I'd love to come back here in the height of summer and see what else is flowering then. All around me, the air is thick with the smell of garlic. That's because we're surrounded by this wild garlic, which is the white flower you can see here. It's quite different to the bulb garlic that we'd grow in the garden, but the leaves are really good for making things like garlic bread. So you can sprinkle the little chopped up garlic leaves onto bread to make nice garlic bread, or in pesto. There's quite a good diversity of plants around here. So we've got ivy and things like that, but we've got some beautiful ferns, including hart's tongue fern and these tall sort of shuttlecock type ferns. I'm not sure what exactly they are, but they're absolutely beautiful. And further down the line, we've got some bluebells as well. So bluebells love our quite mild climate. So we're quite damp, we're not generally too cold or too hot, and they love open woodland, which is exactly what we've got here. So all around there's hazel and beech and things like that. And beech is quite a late coming out into leaf, so there's lots of light on the floor in spring, which is perfect for these bluebells. As I mentioned before, there's quite a lot of diversity, so we've got some wild strawberries in here as well, some sticky weed, which you might know, and also something called pignut or earthnut, which what people call around here is earthnut, which is at the bottom of its stem. It has like a little hazelnut, which you can eat, I think. I haven't tried it myself, but it's a lovely little umbellifer, so like a platform of flowers, and it's white and yeah, gorgeous. But the best time to look for bluebells is a day like today, actually, where it's quite cloudy and damp, because that means that the light of the bluebells looks just perfect. Another thing I've just spotted is a beautiful pink red campion. So yeah, great diversity here. So this lovely little yellow plant you can see beside me here is common cowwheat. It's related to things like yellow rattle and the lousewort that we saw out on the moors. And that means that it taps its roots into other plants' roots to steal nutrients. For common cowwheat, that's things like oak. And what it does is it will tap its roots into the oak trees and steal things like carbon and other minerals as well. There is a young oak tree growing above me here. It is reaching the top of the canopy, but it's quite small, so it's probably, I would estimate, around like 50 years or so, not too old. When it's growing, It's the larval food plant for an incredibly rare butterfly called a heath fritillary. We don't have any that live here, so they won't be making use of it here, but we do have some on Exmoor, which is not too far from here. We're in Cornwall here by one of the rivers. The heath fritillary butterfly will feed pretty much only on this plant, and that's how it will live, and that's probably one of the reasons why it's quite scarce. And one thing that the common cowweed needs is ants for its seed dispersal. So what it does is its seeds will have an extra bit of fat on them, and the ants will take it back to their nest, and then the little baby ants will eat that fat as they're growing up and leave the seed completely unharmed. What the adults do then is they take that seed, thinking it's rubbish, and throw it in their waste pile with all the poop and things like that. And that's the perfect place for it to germinate. It's lovely and warm, nutritious, moist, and there's no competition around, so it will grow. And that's how common cowweed spreads itself around, is relying on ants. You'll probably recognise this little white flower next to me. It's lily of the valley, which is quite often grown in gardens. Not so much anymore, I don't see it in too many people's gardens. When I lived in Falmouth in Cornwall, there was a lovely, one of our neighbours had a lovely row of lily of the valley, and she would cut the flowers to bring into the house. They smell wonderful. But we're in an ancient woodland here, actually in the Cotswolds, and the whole bank, this side and rolling over to the other side, are covered in lily of the valley plants, and they're just now starting to come out. We're in a little bit of a clearing here, like a small woodland glade, and that's meant that these little flowers here are much further along than everyone else, but they're absolutely beautiful and smell great. We're in a lovely open area of the woodland here. And what's interesting is that we have got the bluebell carpet up in the thicker wood, and then down below, I'm not sure whether it's because we've got this stream, so the ground's wetter, or because it's more open, but the wild garlic, the ramsons, has completely taken over. And so you have this lovely sections of bluebells and then white from the ramsons underneath. It's absolutely gorgeous. Dotted in amongst here is all sorts of other plants as well. So we have seen some violets, but there's quite a lot of yellow archangel, which is a really lovely flower. It's part of the nettle family actually. It doesn't sting, but it's got those lovely like yellow tubular with a nice lip on top flowers. We have a garden variety in our garden, but that's a lot more dominant. It will take over an area, whereas this stuff is very much more reserved, a lot calmer, and its leaves are the real telltale. So they're like completely dark green leaves, whereas our garden variety is a mixture of white lighty green and dark green on the same leaf. So it's really interesting to see the two, but it's lovely to see them here. Again, this is all indicators of ancient woodland. There's loads of birds around us singing as well now that we're in proper spring. So we're deep into May, and we've heard lots of blackcaps, great tits, long-tailed tits, and just to the side here is more like grassland. Looks like a big bank of grassland with cowslips in it and trees. And in the top, in one of the big trees in the top, I can hear a missel thrush singing, which is one of my favourite songbirds. They're a nice big chunky bird, and they're quite defensive of their areas. And when they are being aggressive, they're real like rattly noises when they come out of them, being really aggressive. But when they're singing, they have a lovely, soft, fluty song with lots of breaks where they think about what their next song's going to be. I think they're wonderful birds. We've just arrived at this lovely forest clearing. There's all sorts of plants along here, and just as we got here, the sun's come out, and that's encouraged some butterflies. We've actually managed to find a quite rare butterfly called a pearl-bordered fritillary, just sunbathing on some logs, feeding on bits of bugle and things like that. Like I said, they're quite rare, but they actually feed on quite a common plant. They love violets, especially common dog violet. So we get those small pearl-bordered fritillary near us, which loves the marsh violet, but the normal just pearl-bordered fritillary that is hanging out in these woods here loves common dog violet. They're a lovely little butterfly. It's just been gliding around this glade, especially when the sun's out. It's quite hard to keep up with him because he's very quick and very sprightly, but lovely thing to find. We've just come out of the woodland and onto one of these gorgeous limestone grasslands because we've heard that there's a very special flower and we've just found it. It's just by me here. It might be a bit too small to see on the camera, but it's a fly orchid. So this is a species of orchid which mimics female insects to try and attract a male. Although it's called a fly orchid, with its beautiful burgundy brown top and bottom with a blue middle, it's actually trying to attract some of the digger wasps. Now I've got to try and think, I think it's like Argogytes or something like that. But basically digger wasps is what they're trying to look for. So it's trying to attract the males. It even releases a pheromone that is just like a female digger wasp, so that the males come over thinking there's a lovely lady. They don't get anything, just a bit of a nectar on their back, and then they'll go round to the next flower and hopefully pollinate them. But they're absolutely beautiful. They're very tiny and delicate. They're little jewels in the grassland. This is the first time I've actually seen them really, and they're absolutely beautiful. Lovely, lovely, deep dark colours. We're in a new forest now, and we've just managed to find this gorgeous patch of lily of the valley. But my friend Sarah, who's just hiding around the corner, she didn't want to be on camera, has just managed to find a very rare plant. This is angular Solomon seal. So very similar to the one that we have in our garden back at home, but where ours is huge with great rows of flowers, this is much smaller, only not even a foot high. The stems, as the name suggests, are quite angular. So when I'm feeling them, it feels very like flat, and the stems are quite like a weird shape. They're not round at all. And the flowers underneath are much larger compared to the plant than we have back at home. They're also paler green, but the big thing is that there are far fewer flowers per little cluster. So whereas at home I have about, on each cluster going up the stem, there are about 4 different bells. On this one there's only 1 or 2, so much daintier, and it's a very restricted plant as well. Around here it only in the UK it only really grows in sort of limestoney woodlands, just like where we are right now under this beautiful beech canopy. But really, really great find. So there we are. I hope you enjoyed the video and enjoyed watching us go through spring looking at all the amazing woodland wildflowers. If you did enjoy the video, please like and subscribe for more, and I'll see you again next time. Cheers!